Part 8, Chapter 8, Road Weary. Being rock stars wasn't easy. When they weren't recording new songs, the Beatles were packing their suitcases to head to the next concert. There wasn't much time to rest. In 60 days in 1964, they played 53 concerts, each in a different city in the United States. The fans were so crazy that, at some shows, the Beatles had to play inside a 6-foot-high cage. When they were on tour, the Beatles had to leave their families behind. John found this especially hard. He had a wife and a baby son. John barely had a chance to see them. What if they didn't play any more concerts? What if they spent their time creating new music in the studio? Brian didn't like the idea. He wanted them to continue playing concerts so they could continue making a lot of money. But the Beatles had other ideas. They were tired of traveling. Instead of sightseeing, they spent most of their time running away from fans who wanted hugs, kisses, and autographs. They couldn't even go to the movies or to a restaurant anymore. After one concert, fans chased down the band's limousine and shook it back and forth, hoping to get a peek at one of the band members. Luckily, John, Paul, George, and Ringo had faked them out. The boys had sneaked away secretly and were hiding inside an ambulance. This may sound fun, but it wasn't. Even performing was a drag now. There were no more shows at small clubs. The Beatles were filling baseball stadiums with fans. As the four of them stood on a small square stage, as many as 50,000 people would be screaming so loudly that the Beatles couldn't hear themselves play. They had to guess when to start a song, and they made lots of mistakes. It was wrecking our playing, Ringo said. The noise of the people just drowned everything. John and Paul had other reasons to be fed up. They were growing into wonderful songwriters. They kept coming up with new ideas that they wanted to try out. But the fans going to their concerts only wanted to hear the old hits, the songs they knew the words to. Against Brian's wishes, the Beatles began to spend more time in the studio. Their early songs had been very simple. She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand were fast, happy tunes with words that everybody understood. The newer songs were different. The first dramatic change came on Yesterday, a song Paul said he heard in his head during a dream. The song is sad, about lost love. Paul's voice is supported by a quartet of classical musicians. Yesterday became one of the group's most popular songs when it was released in 1965. Since then, more than 3,000 other musicians have recorded the song, a record reported by the Guinness Book of World Records. Looky there, guys. In 1965 and 1966, the Beatles recorded Rubber Soul and Revolver. These albums were very different musically from their earlier ones. On one song, George used a sitar, which is an 800-year-old instrument. On another, Paul hired a saxophonist and a trumpet player. And on Tomorrow Never Knows, some of the guitar music was pre-recorded and then played backward on the album. The words to some of the songs were also strange and different. People are still trying to figure out what they mean, but the Beatles couldn't play a song like Tomorrow Never Knows in concert. It was too complicated. Brian kept forcing them to go back out on tour. The Beatles tried, but it didn't work. They were unhappy and decided once and for all to stop doing concert tours. The last concert came on August 29th, 1966, in San Francisco. Brian was upset. He was worried that rock bands that didn't play concerts could not stay popular. Other people were confused. Rumors spread that the Beatles had broken up. George's mother, Louise, answered hundreds of letters from sad fans. The Beatles were not quitting, she wrote. They just had a new album to make. Back at home, the Beatles had more freedom. They got married and spent some time with their families. They went to art shows and even to the movies again. But most of all, they made music. They tried new types of songs. They hired a symphony to play along on a single recording. They took more time than ever before to record albums. The world was changing, and so was their music. They had started in bands in the late 50s. It was a safer, simpler time. By the late 1960s, many young people were angry at the world their parents had made. They were angry about the U.S. government waging war in Vietnam. They were angry about how African Americans were treated. They were angry at big companies for polluting the planet. Folk singers such as Bob Dylan and Joan Baez were writing powerful protest songs. The Beatles wrote these types of songs too. They sang All You Need Is Love on national TV. For the song, they gathered in a circle with lots of friends, held hands, and repeated one word over and over, love. Another song, Revolution, started with a loud guitar and screaming as the Beatles sang angrily about people who started wars. In 1967, a year after quitting the road, the Beatles released what many people think is their greatest album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. What made Sgt. Pepper so special is how the Beatles used so many different styles of music on one album. John sparked controversy with the song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. People thought John was writing about LSD, a drug some people were using. Others couldn't figure out John's lyrics, but even the people who didn't understand the words could agree the song was fun to listen to.